All right, it is recording. It is not live. Hi guys, I'm Randy from Ovation Music and Studios here with Mr. Aaron King. How are you doing, buddy?
I am doing great.
So, do you know if this
It's
records
a
in
tradition.
gallery view? If I'm in gallery view, or does it always switch cameras in
Um,
playback? Have you checked
wow,
that?
I don't know.
Anyway,
I don't know. When you posted the last one, I saw it kind of like pop up and change. I didn't know it was going to do that, which I thought was cool.
huh?
Or
Interesting.
did it pop up and change for? I don't
It
know.
did. It changed cameras every time somebody talked or moved for some
Okay,
reason.
okay. I haven't. I learned one way to do Zoom.
Well, guys, put it in the comments. Let us know how Zoom works. We have no clue. But I'm live here at Ovation Music and Studios. Yeah, I got the shirt on today. The banner's up on the wall again. Aaron's still safely at home. We're in the middle of quarantine. It is May 1st, 2020. I hope we're past the middle of quarantine. At least some restrictions are starting to loosen up. And as these
Yeah.
restrictions loosen up, we thought we'd talk about one of these crazy subjects in music, ear training versus theory. Uh,
I
now,
thought the verses at first was like, this is kind of combative for this subject, but at the same time, it's a good point to like label it as verses because I think a lot of musicians get caught up in one or the other, and in my opinion, it's a little of both. But we can delve into that deeper. But I think as a subject versus for that, uh, I can tell you for me that I got stuck in music theory for a long time, and ear training came a little bit later than it should have. And I don't think I'm the only one that ever did that, but for me, that's kind of what happened.
no, I
And you kind of go
completely.
into what I mean by that.
Yeah, I definitely was a little more. I was more apt to learning the theory personally because I was studying classical music and I was reading, and so I was
Right,
developing my ear with the theory. So
right,
I
right,
never
right.
developed my ear until after I had already learned all the theory. So I didn't do it the other
Right.
way. I couldn't just hear a song and play it when I started playing, but I could read music and I
Yeah.
could do it really fast.
Which is could read it and go really fast. I mean, you're checking off two very big boxes there already. But
Yeah,
yeah, the 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 theory the theoretical part. So let's define really quick before we go any
yeah.
further, or at least I'd like to.
All
And
right.
that and this is my very crude just to for this discussion, at least how I will operate talking about it, but and on a big sense, music theory is trying to give labels and understand, sound and music as an art form. It's trying to name things and understand how they function together. And whereas ear training is like the recognition of those labels and those functions. So it's like at least like to me, that's kind of when I think music theory, it's, oh, what do I call this chord? And you go like, well, okay, what are the notes in it? Okay, I know that by naming the notes, I can tell you what the chord is. But then I play that, and can you say, well, can you recognize that just by hearing it? And that's where where your ear is learning to remember and recognize the labels attached to that sound that you gave in the music theory side of things. That's generally I think of music theory as what are the labels, and ear training as can you recognize it like orally, like without like being told, just doing it by ear, quote unquote.
So I will like 99.9% accept that definition because it's mainly because I don't have a better one because it's fabulous. But there has to be
Oh,
one.
okay, good.
There has to be a margin of error somewhere. So I'm going to put
Yeah,
it.
no, it's not perfect, but
Um, so this begs the question at some point if you can't theoretically name something that you're hearing, are you actually hearing it?
well, I'm not saying that you're not hearing it, but I'm just saying that
Okay.
part of what ear training is, or like by my current definition in this moment, is what ear training is being able to give a label or an understanding of what it is just by ear. Now,
Yeah.
it doesn't mean that you can name exactly what it is by ear or what it's doing. Like if I played this. and you went like, oh, that doesn't sound bluesy, that doesn't sound rock, that doesn't sound, maybe that's like a very basic boilerplate jazz thing. It's like, okay, yeah, you gave that definition, and to me, your ear, that, to even give it
Okay.
that, you know, big definition, that's ear
enough
training
to
at
be
work,
ear training. Okay, that's the ear
in
training.
my opinion.
And I
Yes.
instantly, and you play that, and I hear 251.
And it is a 251, right?
And that's like blatantly here, and I can't tell what key it's in. I don't have a perfect reference. I don't have a perfect
Sure.
pitch by no means whatsoever, but I hear that.
Yeah, you don't have to, you know, and this is, you know, perfect pitch is a different discussion for those. And if people have questions about that, then I think that's a different subject. But you certainly don't have to be able to name what key it's in to, you know, benefit from all these different things. But yeah, you hear 251, and to even just say, oh, that sounds like this genre, to me, that still counts as a form of ear training.
Excellent. So you bring up one huge thing to ear training that I feel like there was more of when I was younger, or at least everybody I was playing with did more of, that I'm not seeing as much of nowadays. And that was, we sat down and just listened to music.
Yeah.
We didn't. Now we're about the same age, and we grew up, and kids came over and played video games, and we played outside, and sometimes we'd have music and play video games, but we still would sit down and just have music on, and there wouldn't be anything else playing. There wouldn't be anything on the TV. And I don't know that kids in this 21st century are getting that at all.
Well, I mean, the medium's changed, like, overall. Like, your grandparents casually listen to records probably more so than someone today, because it's woven in with a visual medium too strong, or not too strong. I don't mean to say it in like a negative way, but yeah, it takes on a different form there. But to me, the just listening to it, like, that is a form of ear training. Like, to me, the listening and the, like, when you said like your kids and you're just kind of like it's like we just listened to it and we might have gone like, oh, that's a cool thing, that's a funny, you know, if you heard this and went, it's like, oh, that's a little rat running across the zone, you know what I mean, like in like a Looney Tune kind of situation. The fact that you said that is the sound of a rat running, you know, like across the room, training. To me, that's, you have given a label to a sound that if you chose to, you would creatively, you could use that in a composition. And the next time you want an effect that sounds goofy or has that feeling, that is a label that counts. They're incredible musicians.
Use that. Was that minor seconds or something?
Exactly. And so you know, like, if you have a playful, you know, like a playful sound, and your label for it is the rat chord or whatever, or the whatever, or the rat, whatever label you give it, that still is a form of ear training. And there's a number of times for me, personal experience, I grew up playing video games in which you go into a cave and it sounds like, and it would be like, oh, okay, this kind of feels like that particular sound. I was like, oh man, that sounds like I'm in a cave, you know, or like I'm exploring, like, it's kind of tense. And I go like, oh, okay, that's, you know, that's what a cave. And I find out later that has a name, and that's like a minor six, or it's a melodic minor informed minor chord. Or you hear this, and everyone knows, like, if you heard, and now suddenly we go like, what's that label we gave it? Like, oh, that's James Bond. You know, that's,
James Bond's like, the label, but it's also everything that has to do with being a secret agent or government conspiracies, or
yeah.
Well, that's.
But that's.
I think in school we studied that as a line cliche, actually.
Sure, and it is. You know, Stairway to Heaven has the chromatic descending part that is also.
I was just doing that earlier. I'm doing it in G because I'm working on a song that's like a. And so I was like, I wanted a jazzy version of that line cliche because I know the effect that line cliche gives, which for me, it's a little bit mysterious. And so because I can hear it and label it, I can go, ooh, I want that minor falling mysterious thing. and then I can just play it instantly. I don't have to think about how to play it. The only thing I have to think about is now, what am I going to do to make it sound my way?
Right, right.
It just gives me speed.
Right. And when we're so in the discussion of like like we hear it and go like, oh, that's James Bond. That is, I'm getting a little bit rambling here because we need like, let's compare it to what the theory is. The ear training part of it to me is being able to recognize that sound to a label. But the problem is a lot of, or I guess what music theory tries to do is give a consistent label that is unbiased to all of the ear training side that we recognize. Now, that doesn't mean that it's wrong. Like I hear that and I go, ooh, James Bond. But music theory says, oh, that's a minor chord with its fifth going up to the flat six and then going to the natural six and then back down. Like in my gut, I still go, James Bond. And that's like, that's a good thing to have. But music theory tries to give you the understanding of that name because it works regardless of what key center you're in. And sometimes it works like in situations that it will have that idea, but it won't, because of other elements of the composition, you might not be able to recognize it as the James Bond thing, but these consistent interval changes, you'll be able to go, oh, that's a fifth, a flat sixth, and a sixth. And if you understand how your instrument works, you can easily apply what those intervals are to where they are on your guitar or on your keyboard.
So all of this begs a question for me. So can you develop ear training without ever learning the theory? Now, obviously, both of us can give some kind of example of this is true, and vice versa. Can you develop perfect theory to the point that you don't need the ear training? I think you could probably find examples of both, but the top guys in general, the ones that do the most work at the highest levels, do both.
Yeah, I would say would do both probably. So my favorite, a lot of my favorite artists, like Don Fagen of Steely Dan and Stevie Wonder, and a lot of those, like at least Don Fagen for sure. You know, you'll see the artist can talk about what they're doing. Billy Joel as well. And they'll tell you what their ideas were and what chords, and they understand all the theory. But there's also the greatest, boy, that's a big statement, but my favorite a cappella group of all time, Take Six. One of the things that the head arranger of Take Six, Mark Kibble, talked about, one of the things that he wished he had learned was music theory, and he never learned it. Yeah, this is, or at least like by what he believes. Now, on some level, and I'll explain this. Take Six is an incredible a cappella group. I was like going through some of their songs, and you'll find some of the most dense, most beautiful kind of chord harmonies being sung. And for him, he didn't necessarily know the names of all the things he was doing. He just kind of plucked them out on the keyboard and said, "Ooh, that sounds good." At least this is according to an interview that I listened to of his, like that was recorded maybe 5 years ago. It was very recent. And he said throughout his career, he didn't necessarily know how to read music and have that understanding of it, but he created like Duke Ellington level big band arrangements for solo voice, or for group voice. And he said when he was in college, a colleague of his, they decided, well, if we have these two notes together here, we were like, oh, that sounds pretty good if we have this bass note underneath it, but only if that bass note moves up and resolves in this way. They made all these different rules. Oh, we don't like doubling the bass note as the high pitch. So they gave all these rules for each other that existed in their own little bubble. And that's specifically Mervyn Warren, at least he talks about Mervyn Warren and Mark Kibble of Take Six. Now, these are people that have worked on harmony on an incredibly high level, but he claims in a recent interview that he doesn't know a whole lot about reading sheet music or giving the label to those. He just finds them. He knows the shapes that he knows.
Found them on the piano and shaped them out. He didn't learn them on paper.
Right, and the voice leading that he does is incredible too, but he doesn't know a lot of the music theory. I would say his ear training is on an incredibly high level, but maybe the labels are functioning on a different level.
Yeah, his ear training is so good that he knows the music theory without knowing any of the terminology of music theory whatsoever. In guitar
Yes,
world,
and that
that
certainly
reminds me of Joe Pass is one who frequently discusses how he's practicing major. It seems like every time I see a video with him, he's talking about how he's trying to learn to read music, and he's one of the greatest jazz guitar players of all time. He can't read music in a genre that requires music reading by all intents and purposes. I mean, jazz is the king of 20th century music theory.
And when asked how he learned how to play the guitar, he would say he would take a record and he'd put his finger on it and slow it down, and he would copy the notes that he heard, because it was slowing. When he slowed it, the record down, certainly would change its key, but it was moving slow enough that he could pick out the notes. And that was
all about you.
Yeah. I can't remember which Joe Pass interview I had listened to of that, but that's how he described how he learned music. And really, whatever labels you give for the sounds that you hear, I think the sky is the limit in terms of your creativity for what you call things. We have the everyone knows that as the lick in jazz. But see, that's just a clever, goofy name that someone had given. Like, if you look up the lick on YouTube, you will find all these players that have somehow ended up playing that same sequence of like a million times in every key, and they just called it the lick. I think we're teachers, right, Randy? Like, we're teachers, so it's like we work from a set of terms that are universal, that we're trying to give to everybody, and they're very useful, and I use them every day. And they
Absolutely.
and I think they work best in tandem with your experiential way of approaching and learning things through ear training. Those labels that you give through your gut feeling are things that you will recognize faster than the label, but the label allows you to use it in more places.
Yeah.
And to other things, to other benefit too.
Well,
you can also compose. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah. As an educator, one of the goals for me as an educator is to try and get the next generation to be more creative and learn it faster than I did.
Right.
One of the ways to do that is to be really good with the terminology and apply it to the ear. If you can apply the terminology to what you're hearing, you seem to be able to get through it faster than if you just try and listen over and over again.
Yes. I was working with a student. Right. I have a piano student that I was working with, which I'll just do this as a music example. I was working a piano student that I've had for like 7 years and still takes stuff regularly, like with me. We were working on a song, and we've been working long enough that it's been a while, but we were working on a song that had like lots of bigger chords. And I know that when I played, and I'll switch down, I played a couple chords, and there was one chord that went, and he was like, man, I really like that chord. It's like, what is that chord? I know it's a chord I like. And that's a thing where if you go like, and his favorite chord was the Hendrix chord, this one too. But we were working on a song that had lots of different motions here. But at the beginning of the song, it started with just these big chords. And it cycled through some of these different shapes. And for him, he knew that he liked a lot of the different sounds. And then we had like a bigger one here. And then the song comes in with the lyrics about right here. And so it had lots of these big jazz chords. And for him, it was like, ooh, I like that sound. It makes like this sound. It's like, boy, that feels like film noir. You know what I mean? Like, that feels like a cigarette, and you're around the corner and it's in black and white. The moment you hear that chord, I go, ooh. And when I first, because I was picking it out to teach him, I learned it, and I was like, man, that feels like film noir. Like, and in my head, the moment I said it feels like this to me, it's and you might appreciate this analogy. When I am trying to learn something by ear, if I have no definitions, it's like fill in the blank.
It takes forever.
But if I have music theory definitions, it's like multiple choice.
You know,
And
and that's
everyone knows what's easier.
and you know, and ironically enough, a lot of what I do now is ear training. I do spend more time ear training than with theory now as a professional,
Yeah.
learning songs for bands, transcribing charts for kids, whatever I need to do musically. 90% of it is done with the ear now. And yeah, you're absolutely right. If there's something that I don't have a label for, I don't get it. One of those for me is a rhythmic ear training thing that I've never gotten good at, and it's the delayed rake for guitar players in R&B music that guitar players use, where you're chopping in R&B, which I got pretty decent at. And then they'll like drag that beat 4 out of nowhere instead of chopping it. And
Yeah. With that little.
it's one I never got. I can hear it. I like it. I kind of don't have a label for it. I kind of have a label for it, but it's not a good one apparently because I can't figure it out. And then musically, anytime I try to transcribe a country song, it always takes me a second longer, even though it's really simple.
Yeah.
I think it's that
that can happen
a label,
for a number.
Right?
Yeah, not having a label and let's talk about, well, I guess if we go down the rabbit hole of talking about labels, well, it doesn't have to be a music theory label. If you said, "Oh, that's chicken picking," there's a label I just gave you. Hey, Randy,
Yeah.
play me, you know what I mean? Like play something that's got a little chicken picking in it, and the first thing you think of is it gives you a series of techniques and it gives you a series of like note choices. Chicken picking immediately, like that label tells you so much more than if you said, "Oh, palm mute this particular string. Make sure you do like an 80% mute," and then like it like.
Yeah. So what does that sound like? I mean, is that you trying to get me to go, or are we trying to do a?
Right. So I guess this is me being in the defense of the big label. The big label, as an educator, sometimes it's easy to say, "Oh, big labels, like that feels warm, or that feels cold, or that feels like I ate something wrong earlier." Like whatever the feelings you have about what you hear, you go like, "Oh, that sounded so warm and chocolatey. Ooh, I love how." You know what I mean? Oh, that feels like a fondue. Like you don't.
I love that. I just like I can like hear the whole scale on that.
Yeah. Like whatever those big labels are, those are welcome.
Yeah.
And those are things that like, I mean, those, is that ear training or is that music theory? It's your own personal music theory.
Yeah, so we're kind of reached a real point where it's like we're really getting into the territory where is there a difference between ear training and music theory? Isn't music theory basically ear training? And ear training is your ability to use music theory?
I think ear training as a part of music theory, you can create music from a theoretical aspect, right? So
okay, so we think Schoenberg 12-tone music right out the gate.
Right, but
I think when you say that theoretical music, I think of Schoenberg and 12-tone, not Schoenberg pre-12-tone, because that stuff is amazing writing and super creative. Right. But when we get to the 12-tone, we really get into where he's doing math to write music.
Well, that's true, but I was going to give a local shout out to one of our students, Parker, who was writing the original song of his, and he was like, "Oh man, I'm trying to figure out a bridge to this song. What do I want to do?" And he went to the music theory side of it because he was like, "Well, I kind of want to do a circle of fifths that kind of just go through major chords," and so we're going like, okay, and just kept going through. Cycled through. He took a theoretical idea. What if I went a fifth from this note, this note, and this note? And he wanted to build an entire section of a song off of that idea. And maybe he heard it in his head like immediately and then did it, or he looked at it was like, I want it to do this.
Yeah, that's been used a lot too. So you could find that in your ear.
Yeah, you could find it in your ear too. But like, I think the way he was approaching it was you know what I mean? Like from a compositional sort, he was like, I want to take this idea and I want to connect it in that way. I think a lot of music works like that. But what's funny is if you approach something theoretical, like if you go, oh, this should work because I'm doing this regular idea. If repetition legitimizes and you like set an idea in motion, that like you can start to hear the idea. Like if I played
Oh
this,
yeah.
this is going to sound really ugly, but if I played this, and you went like, okay, I may not be able to tell you every one of those chords by name, but if you listen carefully, it was the top didn't move and that bottom note just kept going up a little bit at a time. And so like, okay, what's the name for that? I don't know in that moment, but that is an idea where you can kind of hear the logic, the idea behind it, and not necessarily have the label for it, but you go, oh, it moves chromatically up by a half step while the top part stays the same.
For those who do want a label for that, I'd call it a pedal chord personally. I don't know that there is a label for pedaling an entire chord like that and just moving the top note or the bottom note around it. But when we do it in single notes, it's definitely called a pedal, and you can do it classical music.
Yeah, I guess I would call it a pedal. I would call it a pedal too, actually. Yeah. I was just kind of like trying to say from a compositional point. I wasn't thinking about what I heard initially. I was like, I'm going to take an idea and let it grow. But
that was a weird one to pick too, because it's not aesthetically, it wasn't one that I would go for any purpose. But if I need a good build, now I have something in my ear. I know if I hold a major chord and I move the bass note of it up a half step every time, it gives a real awkward tension.
There's the inverse of that of Steely Dan tune that's Deacon Blues, which has this But the very beginning of the song Deacon Blues by Steely Dan, if you look at my left hand, you'll see the left hand goes and you'll see how simple like that the connecting, the underlying part of it is a very simple chromatic idea, but there's a big structure to that is something that when I hear that sound, I can just go, my label for that is the Deacon Blues thing. Which I could break it down further than that. I could say, oh, it's a major 7 chord going to a quartal over a quartal sound over its second scale degree, and then it does that like a half step or like a whole step lower.
But then you lose musicians who know theory.
Yeah. So I don't know, like boy, this is an extra rambly episode, but all I have to say
that's okay.
I just kind of wanted to play Deacon Blues.
It's really hard. This is a tough subject though. Remember, the original subject is ear training versus theory. And in recap, what we've really discovered is we both kind of learned theory first and then developed our ear, but everything uses our ear. If I didn't have the theory, it wouldn't. I don't think it'd change anything that I do. I think it would just slow me down a little bit. I wouldn't be able to remember things as fast because I wouldn't be able to write them down and memorize them. I do have a tendency to be a little bit photographic memory, I think is what they call it, or something, where if I see something, I remember it faster than if I try to just memorize it.
Right.
Even when I memorize music in my head, I write it down inside my head.
Right. So maybe like and for me, knowing the theory helps me recognize similarities between songs. Like it helps me see
pop
big
music.
pictures. Right. Yeah. Or I was going to do doo-wop changes, but
so at some point that we are going to see a video on the 2021, 2020, 2019 pop music lawsuits that are just rambunctious the last year and a half. And a big part of these lawsuits is ear training versus theory. Theoretically, the songs are all
I guess yeah.
exactly the same. And the ear training, they sound exactly the same.
I wouldn't. I think the prosecution would like to sell that harder. I think there's more nuance to it, but personally, but yeah, that's a whole nother thing.
But something to think about. Either way, guys, develop your ear, develop your theory. Your theory is your communication with the other musicians.
Yeah, that's true.
Your ear is also your communication with the other musicians. If you can instantly play whatever I play, then you'll be just fine.
Okay, so and then can I have one more thing in summation?
Absolutely.
Can we do a little game here where you're going to say a sentence or do an action or ask me a question, or a very, hopefully not as long as this setup is, but of give me an example of something that is a sentence that is strictly theory, or an example of something that is quizzing you theoretically, or something that is ear training specific. So give me an example of music theory as a prompt, and then give me one of ear training that is a prompt.
I don't know that I could do them separately.
Well, that's what, like,
especially not on the spot.
Well, that's why, like, I'm just kind of wanting to. Let's cleave the difference between the two in a very succinct way. If I said in the key of E, we're going to do the 1, 4, and 5 chord. So we're in the key of E, and we're going to do the 1, 4, and 5 chord. To me, is that ear training? Is that a statement that is informed by ear training, or is it informed by theory? Which, or more so? I would say that's more of a theory.
That's more of a theory statement. What I play is going to be more of an ear training thing.
Right. So that's so to me, that's why my summation is, if I said 1, 4, and 5 in the key of E, that's the theory. This would be able to go. The ear training side of it would be able to go, oh, that's what you just did, was a 1, 4, and 5 chord in the key of E.
Do it backwards. Okay. Yeah, I would agree with that. The ear training is doing it the other way.
Yeah, and if we ever have another like ear training segment, it would be, I would love to go into what are your favorite ear training, like what's your favorite exercise, like what are your go-tos to like develop your ear, because that's
Well, for those of you who really want to develop your ears, I highly recommend you looking up the Golden Ears catalog. I think it's about $300 to $400. It's about 50 hours worth of recordings of pink noise at frequency changes.
Okay, you're gonna go the space age route. Which is good. I'm gonna go the Joe Pass route, and I'm gonna say, take a song and slow it down and match the pitch. Slow it down. If you can slow it down, you can match the pitch. But take it as slow as you need to go. Very slow.
It is a lot of fun to learn music you want to learn, but sometimes the music you want to learn is too complicated. You don't have to do that either when you're developing your training. You can do simple things that you've heard your entire life. Yeah. Everybody can kind of go, happy birthday to you, and get sort of close to the notes. And then you can grab your instrument and try and figure that out as well.
Yeah. They're both good, though. I bought many an ear training course that just yelled intervals at me, and I had to recognize the name. And I'm still grateful to those. I am still a child of this century. I do believe in learn everything you can. Absorb all of YouTube instructional, like grab everything you absolutely can. Do it, But
it's brilliant how much is out there, and we're putting more out there for you. So guys, when you get a chance, like, comment, subscribe, ask us questions. At OVMS Gallatin Instagram over here. Over there, it's at Aaron King Guitar. Hopefully this is actually going to show in gallery, and so I'm pointing at you, because that would be super awesome. I don't know which side your camera's on, but you have to point to your left to point at me.
Yeah. I just really screwed that up.
Rock on, guys. We'll see y'all next time.
See ya.